Well, hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to this month's Mobility Nerd Herd. And our guest today is none other than Mark LeMaster, former, recently retired, but former general counsel, claims executive, insurance regulator, and a practicing attorney. He sat on every side of the table, and that's exactly where I wanted him on this podcast. So he can help us balance out the different perspectives of looking at this really important topic. Um, Two quick notes before I begin. So I know some of you have to jump off some way through the middle of this thing, and I want to be aware that next month's podcast is September 9th. It's going to be another fantastic speaker, and that information will be going out in the next 24 hours. And then starting in October, we're going to be using this podcast platform to broadcast twice a month because the topics that you guys are asking us to cover are so voluminous and so much is changing so quickly that we can't do it justice. And so we're going to have to open this up to more topics that get to this concept of mobility, insurance, law, regulation, and automobile manufacturing. And it also goes to the point of it's really important that we get your feedback on these topics. Mark, before Mark, if you could just maybe tell everybody a little bit more about the background that I just introduced you on.
Yeah. So my origin of how I got stuck in the insurance business. Spent about a year trying college out after high school and realized maybe it wasn't the right time. So wound up in the Navy. I was an air traffic controller. Great experience. And after getting out, went back to Ohio State, eventually went to law school. First legal role, I was a county prosecutor in here in Ohio, Central Ohio. And wound up prosecuting the CEO of a medical malpractice carrier that engaged in this huge complex fraud. So it was a joint state federal thing. And as that wrapped up, we escorted him off to the federal joint, and ODI, the Ohio Department of Insurance, asked me if I wanted to come work for them. So I was part of the general counsel staff there. Spent a few years there and was fortunate enough to work around just some great people, Peg Essing, John Pedrick. And John may be on the call. If you are, John, we should talk after this. I haven't seen you in years. So after that, Mike and I, when I was at ODI, Mike and I actually met in a courtroom in Franklin County, and we had a cup of coffee across the street, and I wound up joining his firm. So spent a few years there, had a great time, and got recruited by Safe Auto Insurance Group. So I spent about 16 years there. Variety of roles. I was an executive vice president, general counsel at one point, corporate secretary. Then went on to run claims, customer service, even HR for a time. So got a good panoramic view of the industry. And as we were wrapping that business up and prior to selling it to Allstate, I joined Root Insurance. So I was the chief claims and customer service officer there for the past 6 years. So joined them in early 2020, just retired.
Well, Mark, obviously, like you said, we've known each other. I've represented the companies that Mark's been involved in, so I've seen him in action for many, many years. And when he announced his retirement, I thought, what a great addition to the Nerd Herd podcast. And so I want to make sure everybody can hear me, and I think you can. But if there's any background noise, can you let me know? But right now, Mark, why don't we go through the main topic, which is uh, mobility data and this concept of reasonable investigation. And reasonable investigation, many of you guys will um, uh, um, recognize that as an insurance regulatory standard. And Mark, can you talk about it from a regulator's standpoint? What a reasonable investigation means?
Yeah, you could have this chicken and egg discussion. We all know, sort of in the 70s when the insurance departments kind of transformed themselves from purely financial regulation to consumer protection. And that was really kind of the genesis in the early to mid 70s. And I think about it in the most basic form. I think it comes the real genesis of the answer to that question is it comes from the policy. So there's this implied duty of good faith in the policy. It's a contract. Implied duty of good faith in every contract. Insurance isn't special in that way. The one thing that makes it unique, though, it is what they call a contract of adhesion. So it's unequal bargaining position. And, that's why when there's ambiguities in the contract, the insurance companies always lose. They inure to the benefit of the insured. So, and then you have, court precedent that defines that reasonableness standard. And then you start, back in the 70s, 80s, probably even before that, you start to see insurance departments come out with unfair claims practices acts, regulatory bulletins that more and more define that term reasonable investigation. And, having done market conduct exams and defended market conduct exams for many years, insurance companies, departments of insurance expect insurance companies to basically, like, if you could explain it to your mom what you did and feel good about that, and your mom doesn't whack you upside the head and say, hey, you screwed that up, you're probably in pretty good shape. There's no clear definition of what it actually means because it's all factually based.
And the facts have changed because now we have vehicles that have greater amounts of data and video that are appropriate to evaluate in an accident. It doesn't mean every single accident you have to go to that video and data, but what's reasonable depending on the claim, right?
Right. The facts and circumstances of the claim.
But
Did you properly investigate? So
okay.
When I was running, it's funny. I've talked to so many young claims adjusters, and I always tell them, you're sort of practicing law because what lawyers do and what claims adjusters do are really kind of the same process. It's investigate, evaluate, negotiate, and it's algorithmic because if you skip one of those steps, then you're not ready for the next step, and you're going to screw up the next step. So investigate is the first word in that progression, and that means that you have to understand what actually happened to the best of your ability. If there's information out there, if there's witnesses, if there's pictures, if there's data, which is what we're going to talk about, and you can get your hands on it, you should have your hands on it. You should understand that. And only then are you able to evaluate the relative rights and responsibilities of the parties for liability and your damages. So whether it's material damage or it's bodily injury.
Mark, that's a great point. Let me show you one quick video. I think the audience is going to enjoy it, but it's also going to challenge them. You really can't understand an accident without the data alongside the video. On screen, it looks like someone sitting at a red light who drifts down the road and hits a utility pole. And the claimant driver argued that this was an uninsured motorist case. Another car allegedly struck them and forced them into the pole. And then that phantom vehicle allegedly fled the scene. That's not what happened. The data and the video together shows that the driver was solely at fault. Sitting at the light, they floored the accelerator, and in 0.6 of a mile, they hit 104 miles per hour in a 2-lane in each direction suburban strip mall neighborhood. You can't judge speed like that from the video alone. And you can't tell from the footage that the other car never made contact with the speeding car. The video gives you the context. The data gives you the truth.
I've been doing a lot of work and I'm speaking at the NAIC Anti-Fraud Task Force next week, and I've been doing a lot of research on what's called human factors. And, a lot of what we've been talking about on this podcast and what I've been talking about with people in this ecosystem is people don't understand the vehicles they're driving because they're more automated than ever. Okay. But the more I got into the human factors element of all this, and I've been following that along in many of the cases I've worked on, but the depth of science out there illustrates how hard it is to count on a human being's understanding of what took place. And I'm just going to give the audience a quick example. You're driving down the road and you're looking through the windshield. Now, you're going to be the most important witness to the insurance company in many instances. But witness is a really important term. Ultimately, can you get on the stand and be reliable, not just tell the truth? And so when a human being is looking out the windshield, while arguably you have about 120 degree field of vision in front of you, you're really only seeing about 10% of that field. And it's a bit of a cone too. It's not just a flat image. And I welcome anybody to do this while they're in their office or wherever you are. If you turn your head 90 degrees, you think you're seeing everything like it was recorded on a video. You actually are, when you see it, it's not transmitting to an image your brain can really connect to. So think about what's going on in an accident. Now, further complicating this is that when people are in stressful situations, their ability to record what took place in their mind is practically zero. And and so some of the stuff that's been written lately, and there's an article in Carrier Management where it came out this morning. It basically is the same article about this podcast, but worth the read. I wrote it. Yes, I'm promoting it, but it's a really important article because it gets to this topic. So if the human being doesn't understand what the car is doing, has limited ability to really perceive what's going on, and then in a stressful situation can recollect even less. And then that's before you start to get into biases. Then it really makes it hard for attorneys and claims adjusters to just rely on human beings anymore. Can you speak to that, Mark?
Yeah, and this isn't from my insurance experience originally. When I was a county prosecutor, I was a violent crime prosecutor and spent a lot of time talking to, cross-examining, people that were in these ridiculously stressful situations. And humans suck at detail. I mean, as soon as a gun comes out, the only thing, and oftentimes they never got that right. I mean, it's just
Right.
we're really bad at that, and there's biological reasons for it. I mean, if you're a hunter and you're creeping through the woods, you're a caveman, right? You're creeping through the woods and you hear a twig break. It could be the deer you're hunting, or it could be a cougar or a bear, and there's a good reason to react to that and make assumptions is what I'm getting at, right? There's a good reason for your mind to fill in the blanks, because if you don't and you're wrong, you're probably dead. So that's what we got to deal with. That's how our brains work. And then when you put it in the insurance context, and I've hired so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recent college grads, if not thousands, over the years. And we put these people through what's really kind of, given the context, a pretty light training. We give you some concepts, and then we pat you on the head, and we put a handset on your head and a claim system in front of you, and now you're making pretty consequential liability decisions, which, depending on the facts, can be monumental. Maybe the most important thing that ever happened to the person you're talking to, right? So then you think about how our brains work, and you're like, you can skip a lot of steps there. Assumptions are, what they say about assumptions, right? So we're just we're just not good at that. And that's all we had, back in the day. Police reports, things like that, witness statements. And now the police reports are one of the most inconsequential pieces of data that you have. As a claims adjuster, one of the least consequential tools you have. In fact, they're kind of dangerous because having seen thousands of police reports, I can tell you probably 50% of them have errors in them. So, fast forward to this digital age and these cars that, Quantive and you do a lot of work on, a lot of cases on. I don't even need to talk to humans. Essentially, if we could pull that data, and I think we're going to get into this, but if you could know what that car knew, know what those cars knew, you could make 100% accurate decision with no bias, no filling in the blanks, no assumptions. It's all there.
Well, let's speak to, I hear some people, and I hear this from plaintiff attorneys and defense attorneys and insurance people. Yeah, but I don't really want to know if my person
Yeah.
actually made a mistake. Blind ignorance is better because then it's easier for me to have plausible deniability. And like, how does that work in the world?
I have heard, and I think you and I talked about this at one point, but because I was kind of shocked by it. I actually heard a PhD level data scientist, so I'll tell you the context, but a PhD level data scientist, as I was attempting to build a liability determination machine learning tool with those guys, actually say to me, well, won't we pay more claims? Why do we want to use this data? And I'm like, oh my God, like, are you really serious? So we use that on the pricing side. Most insurance companies do. That's how, you hit a website or you call a phone number. And I'm sure you all are aware of this. Everybody's an insider, but you have all that pre-fill data. And we know who lives in your house, what kind of cars you drive, all kinds of stuff about you. And we can give you a rate that's probably 75, 80% accurate without asking you any questions because we have that data. It's all there. And then you look at the fulfillment, which I think is the claims and customer service side of the business. The fulfillment side of the business, the fulfillment of the promise that we make in the contract to say, hey, look, you get two things. We're going to fix what you broke if you meet these terms and conditions and pay for it. And then we're going to hire you a lawyer if you get sued for breaking it, right? But when you look at what happens actually in most insurance companies today, the front of the business is just inundated with data, inundated. The back of the business, for whatever reason, there's a hesitancy to pull that data in to help you make better claims decisions, which it's maybe not the most consequential thing for the insurance company, but it's very consequential for the people in the accident. It's just my observation, and like I said, I have such a panoramic, unique view of the industry. It always struck me as weird that the front and the back of the businesses are not as connected as they probably should be.
Yeah. So when you say front end, you're talking about acquiring the policy, issuing the policy, finding out who you're insuring. And then when an accident happens, the back end of the policy or the back end or the claim process, you're saying we're not using data that's available. And in many cases, I would say 99% of the cases, it's verbal accounts of what took place. Is that a fair characterization?
Sure it is. And I mean, think about the expense of that. We actually have been a part of studying this problem over the years and assessing like how much time or how much, let's put it in terms of LAE, how much
Before you go, what's LAE?
Loss adjustment expense. If you don't know what that is, you probably shouldn't be on this. No, I'm just kidding. But LAE is the cost that it takes to run an insurance claims operation. So it's not claims payments. It is the cost of running that operation, paying adjusters, paying for your system, et cetera, et cetera. So we studied at one point along the way what percentage of LAE, so that spend, and generally it's about, it varies from company to company, but it's about 9 to 10% of your earned premium. CEOs just kind of look at that. Sometimes they look at claims as the number on that financial statement, and they're cool if it's 9 to 10%. And they don't really question it as much maybe as they should. My thesis is that, and I was kind of on this maniacal march for maybe the last 8-10 years of my career about this concept of a path to 5, a path to a 5% LAE. What if we could cut it in half? So we started doing studies, and we determined that probably, and this is how I got to 5, about 50% of the total economics of running a claims organization is associated with determining liability and everything and injury, that sort of thing, and all of the people that it takes inside your company to do those activities. So think about that. That is a really inefficient economic system.
Especially as if you say that a lot of that can be shortened and much more accurate if objective information is used instead of what we just talked about as flawed human being recall of what took place.
Yeah, it's clearly we kind of suck as humans at those activities. And then when you put your business hat on and it's your job to, run your company at a 95 operating ratio, which for those that aren't in the business means that's your profit margin. So you're making a 5% return on your money at that point. And most companies price to a permissible loss ratio and then target an operating ratio of about 95, 96. So you're sitting there with a huge opportunity, because I always liked working on the bottom line side of the business, because it was so easy for me to come back to my boss, the CEO, and say, hey, we made these changes and I just made you $2 million next year. And guess what? We didn't have to take on any additional risk. So to generate, that $2 million, you're going to have to generate, quick math, something like 500. Patrick, you would know better than me, but like $500 million to generate that $2 million or something like that. Rather than just scraping it off the bottom line. And the way you can do that is through these tools, using data.
Well, let's talk about the bottom line from a risk perspective. Okay, Mark? So when a claim department gets it wrong, and there's wrong and there's really wrong. And please don't talk about any specific case, okay? But when you quote unquote believe you're insured and you tell somebody else go pound sand, talk about having to rework the file. What happens if you get it really wrong? And listen, we don't want to make this a bad faith delivery, but it's certainly an element of all of this. And for attorneys practicing in this space, it's not just about reasonable investigation in the insurer context. It's about your professional duty to represent your client well, right? So, but if you could talk about getting it wrong, getting it real wrong, and how that really gums up the process.
It is, I'm pretty laid back and aggressive and all that stuff, and kind of water off a duck's back sort of thing. And otherwise the jobs I've had, it would drive you crazy. But the only thing that really ever kept me up at night was I've got, about 1,000 people making literally millions of decisions every year. And any number of those is going to be wrong. Any number of them, 5, 10, 15, who knows what percentage, but they're wrong. Some of them are wrong. And when they're wrong in the right way, you get a bad faith claim, and it is super disruptive because now I'm not focused on making the organization better. I'm not focused on, trust but verify. I'm not focused on auditing, whatever. I am focused on trying to
You're
trying to
trying to
mitigate
put you're
wreckage.
trying to put the fire out.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it involves, and it's not just the general counsel. I've seen it from that side, not just the claims head. I've seen it from that side. It's the CFO, it's the CIO, it's the CEO, it's the chair of the audit committee. It makes for some very uncomfortable conversations in a boardroom. I've had many, many, many of those. And it slows the organization down. It is very disruptive.
And it's usually not something that was really complicated. It's somebody made an assumption
No,
based on an assumption, and you're off to the races. And then you're sitting
I-
there
I'm
saying,
sitting
how
here.
did that happen?
I'm sitting here. I literally have case files running through my brain. We won't talk about any in particular, but yeah, I will give states. Pennsylvania, back in the Lackawanna County days, that sort of thing, where you could sneeze and you get a bad faith claim, and I just think about the series of those cases that we extinguished, and I didn't even mention dealing with the E&O carrier. That's a beast of its own, and super complicated. Uh, but not one of those, not one of them. I've almost never seen, and I've seen a ton of bad faith cases. I've never seen a bad faith case that was actually intentional. I cannot sit here and go through my Rolodex of files and pick out one where I had a bad apple in the pile, and this guy, girl, claims adjuster, just screwed somebody over because they didn't like, for whatever reason. I've never actually seen that. It's usually an honest mistake. It's an assumption, or it's an honest mistake.
And the idea of getting objective data and getting it quickly and being able to make an informed decision, those cases would hardly ever make it to your desk as a chief claims officer, right?
No, no.
It just goes through the process.
Yeah,
So, and we're in a spot where the car manufacturers are building cars that are robots, and these robots are doing more and more of the driving. So human beings have a hard time even understanding what the car is doing.
good point.
And then you have this really good record of data. And sometimes you have to press the car manufacturers to give it up. But, my legal position on all this is that data is owned by car manufacturers. And I expect legislation in the within the next year to make that a definite. So from the standpoint of a legislation, um, or regulation coming out of DC, which, I think DC is a little bit stressed right now. I don't see that happening. But a regulation or a legislation that says there are people that have a vested interest in an accident. They need to understand what happened, not just the owner, but the people have to deal with the risk. The people have to represent the people in the accident. And the public should have access to their own data, but also innocent parties, people on sidewalks, people in the other car. And I think there's a really good public policy argument to say that the data exists. It's inexcusable to not want to look at it because sometimes the car's making the mistake as well. Or
Sure.
sometimes the drivers, and we see this all the time now, drivers are saying the car did it.
Yeah.
And then there are times we see where the car actually does fail. And now the insurance industry doesn't have a great way to balance out traditional negligence liability. It's usually done on a 100% basis. Driver A, 50, driver B, 50. Well, how do you squeeze in car C for its share of liability? And it's not like the car manufacturer is going to say, yeah, sure, send us the report, we'll write you a check. So the the getting the data from the car manufacturer is going to be my most important mission over the next 12 months. It's been my mission for a long time, but it's because society and the insurance industry needs to be able to get this right. And we can't work off human perception anymore. Is that a fair statement?
Sure it is. I mean, we're walking around with cell phones that have more computing power than the Apollo mission used to go to the moon. It's just it's invaded all of our lives. I myself try to avoid like asking Chat GPT questions, but damn, it's good. So we're just, and we're so used to it. And it's not going to slow down. It's only going to get faster. You can't swing a dead cat without seeing a data center. I mean, I live in outside of the boundary of Columbus, Ohio, but there must be there's at least 5 data centers that I know of here, right? So this stuff is coming for us all. There's no question about that. And we're as humans, we're pretty adaptable. We're adapting to it in a unique ways. It's probably making life a whole lot better in many, many ways. I think the benefit outweighs the negativity of it. And when you go to that, back to the concept of the front and the back of the business being connected. So you have this experience as a auto insurance buyer. You get on the website, plug in a couple of data points, your address, your VIN number, whatever it is, and the industry compiles all this information. They give you a very accurate rate. You'll love that. It's more precise pricing. So it's almost a customized rate for the risk that you present. That's what credit scoring and all of that stuff. It really kind of started. It's called segmentation, but it really started right about there in the early 2000s. And then you have you have an accident, you file a claim, and yeah, you might put some work with the company through the app. But that's really kind of where the use of data tools sort of ends. And I see that changing. I see that changing. Like Quantum is doing a lot of good stuff on this, and I see that changing. And I think in the future, if you were to ask what's it look like, what's a claims organization look like, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Referred to my maniacal kind of decade-long journey to shake some of my C-suite peers awake about, well, wait a minute, this is all great, love it on the front end. Where's mine? And by the way, I can generate through LAE savings a more efficient economic model and a more accurate claims outcome. So I one time I wrote this, it's got to be a 40-some page white paper, and it was called The Path to 5. And the cover of this paper that I wrote was a centaur. So it was the bottom of this person. I found some goofy picture off the internet, but my point that I was making was, the top half is human, looks like a claims adjuster, Oxford shirt, headset, and the bottom is a robot. And I think that's what the future of claims looks like is I called it the claims centaur, half computer, half person. And I think, you think about the military is working on this stuff. So exoskeletons so that, a typical soldier can go from carrying a 100-pound pack to a 400-pound pack, whatever it is. The same holds true with claims adjusters. If you put an exoskeleton of data tools around this person, particularly for liability determinations, we know that around 50% of the total cost of a claims organization is that claims organization making liability determinations. And the funny thing about that is, if you think about this, only about of a typical auto carrier, maybe 40% of their claims involve some sort of liability determination. So it really punches out of its weight class, right? You've got this process that you're only using on less than half of your total work, and it's costing you 50% of your total cost. That's got to change.
Let me add something to this, and I think most of the audience knows my background, but before becoming a lawyer, I spent 11 years in the insurance industry, and I was the claims adjuster trainee you talked about, and I went to claims training school 6 months after they sat me in a desk and said, "There's your phone," which is wrong. But I would, on any given Monday, because we had the weekend to account for, it's not like that anymore because we have call centers. But on Monday, I would, get 20 new car accidents. And there were parameters. If it was a vandalism claim, don't take a recorded statement. If it was a two-car accident, you must take a recorded statement and you must get it from two people. And if there's a witness, you must get the witness or multiple witnesses. Um, I took so many recorded statements. Now, this is going back some, but I don't think it's that different from what reality is now. That recorded statement very rarely gets used. What gets done is the conversation then gets characterized by the claims adjuster in their notes. And so we're sort of
Comes the human mind.
yeah, we're compounding this human effect on this.
Yeah.
And but it's also taken considerable amount of time to do this. And that time turns into loss adjustment expense, right? And that turns into the cost out to consumers in the form of rate. Everybody's paying that tax.
They are. And I don't know what form this will take, but I think if you think about LexisNexis, remember back in the day, it was Choice Point for certain stuff, and it was this data vendor for this stuff, and Reed Elsevier, LexisNexis combined all of that, and now you hit LexisNexis. There's a couple of competitors, but it's the same process. They're consolidating all of that data. They're selling it to the companies to do quotes and pricing and that sort of thing, right? And I think that's how this materializes. That's how you operationalize the claims part of this. Is there's going to be an entity like that that is taking, GM's ADAS, EDR data, whatever they have, Tesla, pick your manufacturer. They're all coded a little bit differently. The underlying math is probably a little different. The symbology is a little bit different. So you need a third party that's gonna interpolate all of that and output. Okay, here's what car A did. Here's the configuration of car A. Here's the configuration of car B. There needs to be an interpolation, and that's why you need like a third party entity. And then, so it's kind of a subscriber service in a sense, just like we use in the front of the business, where the insurance companies probably contribute information just like we do to LexisNexis, and you get the value of those machine learning models that are developed by that consolidator to help you make liability determinations. So I don't think you need to speak to humans for all the reasons we've said. I don't think you need to really speak to humans in most cases.
So you've seen, over the last couple of years, demonstrations by, you said Quantive. I just want to make sure everybody understands. I was the founder, I am the founder of Quantive Risk, and you've seen the tool Quantive Risk has called CrashView. And
It works.
it's the ability to take data from cars, match it to the video if it's available, get other objective data, and basically create a dashboard of what happened in an accident without a lot of human being input. If anything, the human being says this, and then you see if the human being's version lines up with that. But I want to get back. Go ahead.
Regulators are gonna, just like credit scoring. You remember the journey of credit scoring, super skepticism, rightfully so, rightfully so. But over time, and credit scoring's kind of peeled off, and there's other tools that essentially do the same thing. But the regulatory system will be skeptical of those processes at first, and you're always going to have a human making the final
Right.
decision using human judgment. Human judgment is pretty damn good. Human recall sucks. So that's the difference, right? And that what you're describing is that exoskeleton that I envision when I think about the claims centaur. We're using tools like Chat GPT and those sort of things to draft, consumer facing letters and automated stuff, keystrokes, blah, 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 blah. That's all happening. That's pretty trivial stuff, really. It helps around the margins. I was able, using some of those tools, to get my shop's LEE sub 9, close to mid 8s. But you hit a wall. You figure out that you hit a wall pretty quick. And that's why you start doing the studies like, oh, wait a minute, why can't I take more expense out of this? Like,
Well,
and
let's get back to reasonable investigation, because I mean this is all going to anchor on that point.
Mhm.
And I'll just tell the audience this one story. I was demonstrating quantum risk to regulators, and again, quantum risk takes this data, puts it in a platform. There's a tool, there's a bot. You can, query the bot. How many occupants were in the car, with the windshield wipers on. You can ask a lot of questions. There's, a couple thousand data points there. This is not black box data, guys. This is data that is running through the machine the entire time. Was the car in full self-drive, for instance? Did the car hydroplane? So there, was the Bluetooth on? So there's all these signals that are coming out of the car. So to make sure the insurance regulators understood this, we've been taking quantum risk. I'm going next week to do it some more and demonstrating it to the insurance commissioners. And there hasn't been a lot of skepticism. The skepticism that I've seen is when they start to say, is this another way to get to credit scoring? Or is this
No.
another way to get to using some sort of data capture that the driver hasn't given permission to? And no,
Well,
this
we
is,
want the regulatory system to be skeptical. It's a good thing. It's
yeah.
a healthy.
But the grounding moment for me was when an insurance commissioner, I'm not going to identify the state, but this commissioner comes running up to me afterwards and he said, "Don't you think this changes what a reasonable investigation means?"
Sure it does.
And I mean, I've been through those same market conduct exams. I've been in, looking at the unfair insurance practices legislation and act for many, many years. And I've always known this term. But when he said this, it was, well, you're right. It's kind of hard not to think about that. So can you address that a little bit?
The writing's on the wall. Sure. If that data, irrespective of this interchange that's going to happen in the future, whether it's just going to happen, but in the meantime, there are ways. Quantum is one of those, but there are ways. Telematics is one of those. There are ways to get that information, and many insurance companies are using those connected devices. What do you call it? Vehicle.
Dongles? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking the vehicle character, whatever, but many insurance companies are using those. If I were a plaintiff's attorney, I was often surprised in monitoring, because I have my own litigation shop in both claims orgs I ran. And I was always surprised at the very few requests that we would get from plaintiffs' attorneys for instance, like telematics data or any sort of Donegal data. And I think, wow, if I were a plaintiff's attorney, reasonable investigation applies to them too. I mean, it's investigate, evaluate, negotiate. Lawyers do the same thing. Insurance claims adjusters do the same thing. And you ought to be preparing yourself to answer those questions as a claims org.
Yeah, that's why quantum risk is unique, because quantum risk will take the information from the car manufacturer. It's not quantum risk data.
Yeah.
And then it will say to anybody, we're not going to give it to everybody. Like they have a right to get it, but it's going to be the same grounding truth. This is not insurance company data. This is data directly from the car. You don't like what the data says? Take it up with General Motors, Toyota, We're just taking that data in an objective way, make it understandable so people can process claims. Now, I sat through a claims committee meeting the other day where they're going over high automated vehicles, and they went through 15 accidents involving higher levels of automation. They don't get into that room unless they have a claim that fits that parameter. We went through 15 accidents with the claims team, and those 15 accidents were evaluated in 60 minutes. Now,
Yeah,
as an executive, that's impacting your loss adjustment expense, but it's also
that's the
improving.
exoskeleton. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's improving what is a reasonable investigation too. It's eliminating or really de-escalating any potential risk of guessing wrong. And
I think I like your comment about the regulators not pushing back, and I'm encouraged by that because I mean, how could you say that that's not a reasonable investigation? That is the most reasonable investigation you could do. You're
well,
taking assumption and bias completely out of the situation.
well, we talk about this in the article too that's in Carrier Management today, and you have a link to it in the comments. It's an easy read. I'm going to make one analogy that just when I was writing that article, it really just jumped to the front page for me. Right now in professional baseball, we have umpires standing behind the plate. Their sole job is to look at a very defined area with the knowledge that that area is going to be something they must evaluate. It's a strike zone. There's other things they have to do, but it's a strike zone. They have to get it right. And um, before we get to, I'll call it automated or data-driven strike zone analysis, it was done by a human mind. And the statistics on this, it's been researched by Boston University and other organizations. The statistics on this is that professional umpires can get this wrong. And I'm quoting from I'm referencing my own article, but look at the article. But it's about 20% of the balls and strikes are wrong.
That's the
10
difference between going to the World Series and not.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
like these are professional people, but they're human beings.
right.
And we now have the ability to superimpose in the playing field things like where was the soccer ball? Or where was the hockey puck? Or did the shot clock go off at the same time the ball was released?
You know,
Or and the
go ahead.
tennis line call is the most important one of these things. We basically have eliminated the guesswork, the human judgment, and deciding whether something was inbounds or out of bounds in tennis. So why is that? I'll call it one industry, the sports entertainment industry, using data-driven analysis. And yet in the legal and the insurance world, we haven't quite gotten there yet.
As I sit here, I think about it in terms of objectivity versus subjectivity. So, you know, to put it back in the claims context and the concept of reasonable investigation, maybe the best definition of reasonable investigation is a measurement of how objective it is. If you could assume you could do that, right? And you think about this concept of injury and liability. Let's focus on liability. You know, we have long accepted on the material damage, and that's so broken cars, two things in the insurance industry, broken cars and broken people. So I'm talking about broken cars here, and we call that material damage. And, you know, material damage, CCC has basically, and it's that, again, it's that entity that consolidates this. It's a CCC really at this point has no competitor in the States. It's taken valuation and objectified it.
You're
How
talking
did
about physical damage to the car.
physical damage to the car? It objectified the value and the extent of that physical damage. And it's been happening for so long, we don't even really question it. It just is part of what we do. But then you look at liability and it's so different. We are still doing basically what we did in the 70s and 60s, 70s.
in the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah,
So,
it's a human endeavor.
so in the 11 minutes we have remaining, Linda Nelson, who shares my last name and my family history for 40 years, 45 years. Uh, Linda, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, so one was, what do you think will be the biggest change in the next 5 years?
Mark?
Pass it on, Mark.
I think it's exactly what we're talking about, honestly, because I was toward the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years of my career in claims. We were starting to use chat GPT like tools, machine learning for basically ticking and tying boxes and automated assignments and all of that kind of stuff. And that's really kind of trivial at this point. And I think you will see significant progress being made on machine learning applied to liability decisioning using the data that Mike is talking about. Long story short.
But we're not eliminating the claims adjuster from this process.
No, no. You will need fewer. Obviously, something like, and we also studied this, it's like, call it 70% of the total cost of LAE is human capital. So obviously, if you're going to drive to a path to 5, you're just going to have less claims adjusters doing more consequential things. That's what the exoskeleton is, right? So the average injury adjuster, let's say probably 180 features on their docket. That's a homeostatic number. In and out, about 180. And what if that could be 380? What if it could be 480? And
Yeah, and that reduction in loss adjustment expense ultimately flows to the insurance company being more competitive because their rates are dropping when insurance companies that don't get to more automation will lose out on that. And it's a price-driven business. The auto insurance industry is price-driven. And then the lower the rates, ultimately it's a benefit to policyholders and the public at large.
we're all a victim of our own ingenuity when you really think about it. I mean, segmentation that started back in the late 90s, mid 90s, somewhere in there, commoditized this auto product. It's basically cereal. It's why you see Flo, and at one point she was in a grocery store with boxes, and Geico has that box thing. What they're telling you is this product is it's
A commodity.
It's differentiated by price. So you're not going to stop that. So the next thing to fall is reducing your loss adjustment expense to run claims. If it's
using
true.
using
Yeah.
data when it's available and reliable. So,
Right.
Miss Linda? Yeah.
Yes. What comes to mind for me, gentlemen, is that AI and automation is involved in so much, like you said, on the front end, Mark, right? It's the pricing, it's all of that information. It's how we get insurance these days. We go online, we, put our information in, it comes up with a whole bunch of different prices. We're so involved in the front end. I'm really wondering why it has taken so long on the back end. And just for the people that are here, I have 11 years experience way back when in the auto claims business as well. I was a bodily injury adjuster, and I was a manager for two different very large insurance companies. So I have knowledge of that, but I also have been driving these cars with Mike for the last 10 years. So there is some institutional knowledge here. I'm not just Mike's wife. And I'm just so shocked that there's so many things that are automated on the front end, and yet we're a little reluctant to get that information on the back end. So it's more of a statement than a question, and it's acknowledging what you said, Mark. But that is what I'm thinking of right now. And I'd also like, before we get into some more questions, I'd like to have a couple of links dropped in to the chat. And one of them is a link to this 50-state compilation that Mike has put together on all the different regulations by state that there are in existence now. Doesn't mean they're not going to change soon, and it'll be great to get to it. Maybe a federal law that could be, a difference of opinion, but you are for joining us. That is our gift to you, a takeaway, and there will be a link and a QR code. So pick your poison on that. And then you can also just book a 20-minute call with me if you have any questions, or these gentlemen leave you with any head scratchers that I can help you get the answers to. So there will be 2 links being dropped in, and I can get you over to Mike as well. So I'm not trying to wrap this up. We have a few minutes left, but anybody with any other questions, or gentlemen with your statements, I'd love to hear. We've had very good attendance and not that many people drop off yet. So if anybody has anything, we should be addressing that at this point.
Yeah, well, so let me, before we get to like closing comments, the 50-state survey is the 50-state survey of what each state has said about reasonable investigation. And this is not new law. We just have new science. And then we have to start to think about the exoskeleton that Mark's talking about. And I do want to add a comment. I was talking to one insurance executive about all of this and, retooling the claim department. And this one executive says, the data-driven automated vehicle world is changing so quickly. It's going to be hard for me to retool 14,000 adjusters. I'm pulling that number out of thin air. So, Mark, you talk about the lack of, or the difficulty in training an entire staff. You're going to have to retrain and build new processes for the entire staff. So, go ahead. Tell me about that.
I'm not sympathetic to that position. It's okay, suck it up and get it done, right? I mean, that's what claims officers do. If you're not changing, one of the things I would always sit down to which company, but CEO and I with new claims training classes. And we'd have like a 90-minute discussion with these kids and just kind of setting expectations and getting personal and letting them ask questions and things. But that was one of the things that I always told them is like, look, if you don't like change, this is probably not the job for you, because I promise you it's going to change, and just get used to that.
Well, that's a grounding principle, right? So let me just establish for the audience, the data is in the cars, but it's not data that lives in the car. The data we're talking about is data that runs the car. It's data that is acknowledging what the human being is doing inside the car, but it's also acknowledging what the car was thinking and doing and sensing out of its cameras and other sensing devices, and how all of that was getting processed. And that ends up being in a big data load that gets uplifted from the car to a cloud. So you don't have to go to the car and get the cloud. And we're not talking about what people call black box data, which is, it's really shorthand for this concept of an EDR device, which really, an EDR device is a safety device that measures airbag deployment and brakes and those sorts of things. But it's really small nuggets of information about what happened at the time of the accident with the safety devices. The data we're talking about exists now in cars. So this is what I tell car manufacturers, you're crazy if you think the data that's in your cars is not going to be relevant to evaluating what happened when stuff went down. You're nuts. So you better prepare for that. But on top of that, that data is probably going to exonerate you more times than not. And to the extent it doesn't, you want to know if the car wasn't behaving properly.
But gentlemen,
And
is that data required based on these regulations you found? Like, for an investigation to be complete, isn't it required that an adjuster or an investigation grabs that data, or am I misunderstanding that?
I think that's a step too far at this
Okay.
point, but there's no
Right.
question the law is going to evolve to say, well, your adjuster simply said, well, my guy told me the other guy was speeding,
Mhm.
and I believed him. Well, that's not going to be good enough anymore because the
Right.
data exists. So that's the central point of all this. And thank you, Linda. Um, and listen, we got a minute left. I always vow to be done at exactly 1 hour. So I'm just going to remind everybody that our next podcast is September 9th, same time. Or as they used to say when I was a kid, same bat channel, same bat time. And then in October, we'll be stepping up the cadence of this. It's really important that you let us know what things you'd like us to see covered. And this is one of the topics. We got tons of requests to have real business people explain their world and how this is uh, uh, how the world is going to change. And last month we had somebody on from Mazda. The month before that we had somebody on from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. We have a very deep bench of people that really want to come in and talk to you about this because their world's changing too.
So
So
follow the Mobility Nerd Herd podcast. It's on YouTube, and there is a way to subscribe to our newsletter, which is a weekly newsletter as well, and it is called Mobility on the Go. That's just some ways to follow us and to keep us in the loop. You teach us, and we teach you. So yes, Mark, thank you so much. That was
sure.
so enjoyable to listen to. Fun fact for those of you who don't know these gentlemen individually, they are both kind of obsessed with heavy equipment. And Mark lives on a farm, and Mike doesn't, but he also has a backhoe and skid steer, and these are two grown men playing in their own sandboxes at this point. So thank you. Nice job, gentlemen. And thank you all for attending. We had a great showing and, have a great week.
We'll see you next month, guys. So long.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Mark, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
See you,
Mark,
Mike.
thank you. Bye-bye.